everybody, and welcome to Unit 1 of OpenStack Psychology. My name is Prescott, and I'm here with Psychcinct Psychology, and I will be going through Chapter 1, Introduction to Psychology, with all of you. And I hope that you stick around throughout the course, and so that you can learn, and this should give you a pretty good understanding of what psychology is all about, and improve your knowledge, and you can expand upon that if you would wish to. So let's get started. Okay, so starting off, what is psychology? So psychology is the scientific study of mind and behavior. So here you can see we got a nice background image, see a bunch of people working together, nice little image. And here we have Antonio Canova's sculpture, which depicts Eros and Psyche. Eros and Psyche is an old myth about, I think it's Eros, who's Cupid, and Eros and Psyche's love and how they overcome obstacles. So you can kind of view it as psychology is overcoming obstacles, but in that circumstance, it's obstacles in the mind. So continuing, what is psychology? So the word psychology is broken into two parts, psych and ology. Psych means soul, and ology is the scientific study of it. So you put them together and you get psychology, which is a scientific study of the mind and behavior. So psychologists study everything about the human experience, from the basic workings of the human brain to consciousness, memory, language, reasoning, personality, and mental health. So it kind of covers all your bases there. History of psychology. So there's several different psychological perspectives. First off, we have structuralism, which is understanding the conscious experience through introspection, which was started by Wilhelm Wundt, or Wilhelm Wundt, if you want to be technical with it, proper German pronunciation. Introspection you can think of as self-reflection, like looking in yourself and kind of thinking about your experiences and going from there. So that's structuralism. Functionalism is focused on how mental activities helped an organism adapt to its environment. Now, this was pioneered by William James, and that basically means, it's kind of in the description for all of these, but how an organism's mental activities allowed it to survive in an environment. So you can think of humans. How was our mental activity in the early stages, way back in the day? How were we able to survive when there's so many predators and things stronger than us? Well, we had a better capacity for mental activity, which allowed us to adapt to our environment and thrive. All right. Then we have Psychoanalytic Theory, which focuses on the role of the unconscious in affecting conscious behavior. And I'm sure you've all, at least in passing, heard about this. It's pretty famous, and the guy who came up with it, Sigmund Freud, is also pretty famous. Unconscious, and we'll go more into all of these. I'm not just telling you this brief description. We go more into detail in a little bit. So then we have Gestalt Psychology, which focuses on humans as a whole rather than individual parts. So Wertheimer, Kafka, and Kohler. Next, we have Behaviorism, which focuses on observing and controlling behavior, which is Pavlov, Watson, Skinner. And I would love to go more into each of these right now, but like I said, we're going to get to it, so don't worry about that. Next, and finally, we have Humanism, which emphasizes the potential for good that is innate to all humans. Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Good old Carl Rogers. So let's go more into detail about each of these different psychological perspectives. So first, we have Wilhelm Wundt, Structuralism. So here you can see him, nice little picture. Wilhelm Wundt is credited as one of the founders of psychology. He created the first laboratory for psychological research. Nice. Wundt emphasized structuralism. He focused on understanding the structure and characteristics of the mind through introspection. Again, looking into yourself and kind of evaluating your mental processes. So, introspection, process by which someone examines their own conscious experience in an attempt to break it into its component parts. So I use myself for an example. Sometimes I do things just on the spur of the moment, and then I'm like, okay, and later I might regret it. And so then I look back at myself and I'm like, okay, what led me to make this decision? and do what I did. That's introspection. Going on, William James and functionalism. So, William James, shown here in a self-portrait, it's a good portrait, was the first American psychologist, not the first psychologist, the first American. James drew from the functionality of cognitive processes, establishing functionalism. Now, functionalism emphasized how mental activities contributed to basic environmental survival, which I kind of told you about already, so I won't beat a dead horse. Next, we have Sigmund Freud. Here's good old Freud here, and a general introduction to psychoanalysis, which was written by him. Sigmund Freud was a highly influential figure in the history of psychology. One of his many books, A General Introduction to Psychoanalysis, shared his ideas about psychoanalytical therapy and was published in 1922. Continuing, Sigmund Freud, in his Psychoanalytic Theory, Sigmund Freud founded Psychoanalytic Theory, a perspective which dominated clinical psychology for many decades. He studied hysteria and neurosis. So, hysteria is seizures, kind of freaking out, that sort of thing. And neurosis can actually lead to hysteria. It covers a wide range of things. So I won't get too much into that right now. All right. So Freud theorized that many of his patients' problems arose from the unconscious mind. And he believed that one way the unconscious mind could be accessed was through dream analysis. So psychoanalytic theory focuses on the role of a person's unconscious and early childhood experiences. So, and I'm sure you might have heard about this, but Freud really emphasized your dreams have deeper meaning than just being dreams. There's something going on that your brain is trying to tell you. That's kind of psychoanalytic theory. And so if you assess your dreams in that unconscious mind, you can kind of work through your problems or find out what your problems are. And he really emphasized how your early childhood experiences will influence who you are today and how you act. All right, so let's keep going. So Gestalt Psychology, which was Kohler, I keep saying that wrong, Kafka and Wertheimer were German psychologists who immigrated to the US to escape Nazi Germany. So Gestalt means whole, so you can think of it as whole psychology. Now, it was based on the idea that although a sensory experience could be broken down into individual parts, like, me touching a table, that's an individual, separate experience I'm experiencing. So it can be broken down into individual parts, and how those parts relate to each other as a whole is often what the individual responds to in perception. So ideas of Gestalt continue to influence research on sensation and perception. So here's Kohler, Kafka, and Wertheimer. And continuing, Ivan Pavlov. I love this guy. I find classical conditioning to be very interesting. So Ivan Pavlov, he discovered the concept of classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is depicted here in this picture. And Pavlov studied conditioned reflexes in which an animal produced a reflex, unconscious, response to a stimulus. So in this case, the unconscious response was salivating in the presence of food, which food is a stimulus. And over time, was conditioned to produce the response to a different stimulus, so salivating to the sound of a bell, that the experimenter associated with the original stimulus. Food and bell became associated. And so here's a nice little graph for us. So step one, before conditioning, the unconditioned response of the dog is to salivate in response to the unconditioned stimulus of the food. That's just what dogs do. And step two is also before conditioning. So the bell ringing is a neutral stimulus, and there's no conditioned response yet from the dog, so it doesn't salivate. It's just like, why is the bell ringing? And then during conditioning, they combine the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus to produce the salivation response, an unconditioned response from the dog. So the dog sees the food while the bell is ringing, and it salivates because of the food, not because of the bell yet. And finally, after conditioning, after they do step three enough, you can ring the bell, which has become a conditioned stimulus, it's no longer neutral, to produce a conditioned response, which is a salivation. It's conditioned because they condition the dog to salivate to the bell. So I find all that very interesting, and you can see a lot in your life how we kind of constantly condition ourselves and others and completely unaware that we're doing it. So that's all I have for this part. I hope you guys found this to be very informative and interesting, and I will see you guys in part 2 of Unit 1. Have a good day.